Lindbergh baby kidnapping. In 1932, America's most famous family faced a nightmare that changed criminal history. Charles Lindbergh, the aviator hailed worldwide for his solo flight across the Atlantic, and his wife Anne had everything: fame, wealth, and a quiet home in rural New Jersey. On the night of March 1st, their 20-month-old son, Charles Jr., was taken from his crib while the family was downstairs. Police found a ransom note demanding $50,000, and outside the window, a crudely built ladder leading down from the nursery. Despite enormous reward offers and nationwide manhunts, every clue led to frustration. 2 months later, the child's body was discovered in the woods nearby. Blunt force trauma to the head, a nation heartbroken. The case became the first true media storm of the 20th century. Newspapers printed daily updates, crowds surrounded the Lindbergh estate. In 1934, investigators traced ransom bills to Bruno Rickard Hauptmann, a German carpenter found with marked notes hidden in his garage. After a sensational trial, he was convicted and executed, though debate over his guilt still fuels documentaries today. The Lindbergh kidnapping's legacy runs deep. Congress passed the Lindbergh Law, making interstate abduction a federal crime and giving the FBI new authority. It also birthed the modern template for media-driven police work. Press conferences, sketches, national alerts. Every future missing child case followed its outline. Behind the headlines, one simple image indoors: a small crib in a quiet house, turned into the center of the world's grief. It proved how fragile celebrity and security can be, and how one family's tragedy rewrote the rules of justice forever.
Patty Hearst. In February 1974, 19-year-old Patricia Hearst, granddaughter of publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst, was studying art history in California when armed intruders from a radical group calling themselves the Symbionese Liberation Army broke into her apartment and dragged her away. Within weeks, she vanished from sight until a shocking twist appeared on television. The SLA released audio tapes of Patty, her voice cold and militant, declaring she had joined her captors under the name Tanya. Soon after, surveillance footage caught her holding a rifle during a bank robbery in San Francisco. America was stunned. Was she a political convert, a victim of Stockholm Syndrome, or both? The SLA was small, barely a dozen people, but it burned with revolutionary violence, targeting fascist institutions. Over the next year, gunfights with police left multiple members dead. When the FBI finally captured Patty Hearst in 1975, she looked emaciated, dazed, and utterly changed. In court, the prosecution painted her as willing. The defense argued that months of isolation, fear, and abuse had broken her will. The jury gave her 7 years in prison. She served 22 months before President Carter commuted her sentence. President Clinton later granted a full pardon. Patty Hearst's story became a mirror for America's 1970s turmoil: wealth versus rebellion, media spectacle versus trauma. Psychologists still debate her mindset. Filmmakers still replay those grainy robbery clips, searching for clues. In one strange saga, ideology, privilege, and terror collided, creating perhaps the most famous kidnapping-turned-identity crisis in modern history.
Chowchilla School Bus Kidnapping. July 15, 1976, Chowchilla, a small farming town in California, turned into the backdrop of an unthinkable crime. A yellow school bus carrying 26 children, aged 5 to 14, and their driver, Ed Ray, was hijacked by 3 men wearing pantyhose masks and armed with guns. They blocked the road with a van, ordered everyone into 2 vans, and drove them through the night. For 11 hours, no one in town knew where the bus had gone. Parents waited by telephones, police combed the countryside. Then, far away in Livermore, the kidnappers forced their hostages down into an underground moving van they had buried in a quarry. Mattresses, a little food, a fan for air, and a manhole cover for escape. Essentially a tomb. The plan was to demand a $5 million ransom from the state, but their makeshift prison started collapsing. After 16 hours underground, Ed Ray and 14-year-old Mike Marshall pushed the lid upward, jammed it open with a stick, and led everyone to safety. Not a single life was lost.
Within days, police arrested the culprits, 3 young men from wealthy families who claimed they wanted easy money and inspiration from crime movies. Each served decades in prison. The Chowchilla case became an instant study in mass trauma and survival. Rarely had a story combined so much darkness and courage. Children soothing each other in the dark, a bus driver keeping calm, a community refusing to lose faith. From that day, Chowchilla stopped being just a town's name. It became shorthand for endurance against impossible fear.
Colleen Stan, the girl in the box. In 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan left her Oregon apartment to hitchhike to a friend's birthday party in Northern California. She accepted a ride from a smiling young couple, Cameron and Janice Hooker, and vanished for the next 7 years. Cameron drove her to his home in the town of Red Bluff, took her underground, and sealed her in a coffin-sized box beneath his bed. He told her a shadowy organization would torture and kill her if she tried to flee. For years, Colleen lived between total darkness and brief bursts of forced labor. She was starved, beaten, and psychologically conditioned to think obedience meant survival. The deception worked because her captor mixed cruelty with moments of kindness, classical manipulation now known as trauma bonding. In 1984, Janice Hooker, broken by guilt, helped Colleen escape. When the case went public, the world could barely imagine that someone had endured 7 years hidden in plain sight. Cameron Hooker was sentenced to 104 years in prison. Psychologists still cite Colleen Stan's ordeal as one of the deepest examples of control through fear. Her calm testimony changed how courts understand captivity. After her rescue, she refused to let her name remain a symbol of horror. She became a counselor for abuse survivors, teaching them that silence itself can be prison.
Adam Walsh. On a summer afternoon in 1981, 6-year-old Adam Walsh disappeared from a Sears department store in Hollywood, Florida, while his mother shopped nearby. 2 weeks later, his severed head was found in a canal. The rest of his body was never recovered. For the United States, it marks the end of parental innocence. The investigation stumbled through false leads and public panic. A drifter named Otis Toole eventually confessed and later recanted. No one was ever tried, but police later closed the case, naming him the likely killer. Through grief, Adam's father, John Walsh, transformed loss into mission. He co-founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and became host of America's Most Wanted, helping capture over 1,000 fugitives. Adam Walsh became a symbol of every lost child, his story prompting federal databases, Code Adam store alerts, and nationwide reform in how police handle missing person cases. It showed how one tragedy could rewrite systems worldwide, and how parental love, even in absence, can turn outrage into protection for millions.
Jaycee Dugard. In June 1991, 11-year-old Jaycee Dugard was walking to her school bus in South Lake Tahoe, California, when a car pulled up beside her. A man with a stun gun attacked. Another woman helped shove her inside, and the vehicle disappeared. 18 years would pass before anyone saw her again. Her captors, Philip and Nancy Garrido, kept her hidden behind fences and tents in their suburban backyard near Antioch, California. Over time, Jaycee gave birth to 2 daughters fathered by Garrido while living in total isolation. They watched television but rarely left the enclosure. In 2009, Garrido's suspicious visit to a university campus with the 2 girls alerted police. DNA confirmed Jaycee's identity. She had been missing longer than she had ever been free. Her return stunned the world. Her composed interviews and memoir later detailed how hope became her quiet rebellion. The case revealed how bureaucracy can fail the vulnerable. Parole officers had visited Garrido's property dozens of times without discovering her. Afterward, California overhauled sex offender oversight and training. Jaycee Dugard's story turned from tragedy to testimony, a lesson in vigilance, survival, and unimaginable inner strength.
Elizabeth Smart. Salt Lake City, June 2002. 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was asleep in her bedroom when a man with a knife whispered, "Don't make a sound." He led her through a window onto a foothill trail and into captivity that lasted 9 months. Her kidnappers, self-styled prophet Brian David Mitchell and his accomplice Wanda Barzee, subjected her to religious control and constant abuse while masquerading as nomadic preachers. Elizabeth's family refused despair, launching one of the largest searches in Utah's history. In March 2003, a motorist recognized her from television and called police. She was found walking in public, disguised in robes only miles from home. The aftermath reshaped both law and understanding of child abduction. Smart testified with extraordinary poise, ensuring her captors received life sentences. Later, she became an activist for child safety legislation and sexual violence prevention worldwide. Her story fused horror and hope, a young girl forced into silence who rebuilt her voice loud enough to protect others. For millions who watched her rescue unfold live, Elizabeth Smart became a face of resilience and proof that recovery is possible even after total loss of freedom.
Madeleine McCann. On May 3, 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from a holiday resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, had left her and her twin siblings asleep in their apartment while dining with friends at a nearby restaurant. When Kate returned to check at 10 p.m., Madeleine's bed was empty and the window stood open. What followed became one of the most widely covered disappearances in modern history. Within hours, Portuguese police, the British press, and an avalanche of global attention transformed a family tragedy into a media storm. Sketches, suspects, and political accusations followed. Sightings poured in from dozens of countries, none conclusive. Years later, Scotland Yard's reinvestigation, Operation Grange, sorted through tens of thousands of tips. In 2020, German prosecutors named a convicted sex offender, Christian Bruckmar, as a suspect, but no resolution has come. Madeleine would be 20 today. Her case introduced the world to forensic DNA on a global stage and ignited debate about media ethics, policing across borders, and the responsibilities of press, parents, and the public. For many, little Maddie remains the missing face of an era that could record everything except the truth that mattered most.
Ariel Castro's Cleveland Captives. May 6, 2013, Cleveland, Ohio. A young woman named Amanda Berry kicks down a locked door and screams for help. Police arrive to find Berry and 2 other women, Gina DeJesus and Michelle Knight, alive after 10 years of captivity in a house owned by school bus driver Ariel Castro. All 3 had been abducted separately between 2002 and 2004, only miles apart. Inside the house, they endured constant abuse, chains, and psychological control. Berry gave birth to Castro's daughter, who was 6 when rescued. Behind that ordinary neighborhood facade was nearly a decade of hidden torture. Castro was sentenced to life plus 1,000 years in prison, but took his own life a month later. For the women, the journey back was not toward fame, but healing. They used their stories to build awareness about missing person investigations and domestic imprisonment. The case shattered the illusion that kidnapping always ends quickly or far from home. It had thrived in plain sight. From then on, Cleveland's quiet streets carried a lesson known worldwide. Evil can hide behind everyday doors, and hope can survive even there.
Natasha Kampusch. On a March morning in 1998, 10-year-old Natasha Kampusch vanished on her way to school in Vienna, Austria. A nationwide search found nothing for 8 years. Her abductor, Wolfgang Krieglepil, an electrician, kept her hidden in a tiny soundproof cellar beneath his suburban home while living a normal life above it. He controlled every moment: food rations, reading material, sunlight. By her late teens, he allowed her brief trips outside but monitored her constantly. In August 2006, when Krieglepil took a phone call and looked away, Natasha seized her chance and ran until she found help. Police soon found her captor's house. He took his own life hours later. Her reappearance shocked Europe, a living ghost stepping out of suburbia. In the years after, Kampusch spoke publicly about trauma and identity rebuilding, turning intrusive fascination into education about victim autonomy. Her case triggered major reforms in Austrian missing child investigations and influenced European law enforcement training.
Through calm self-definition, she refused to remain a headline, instead showing that survival is not the end of captivity, but its defiance.
Kamaya Mobley. In 1998, in a Jacksonville, Florida hospital, a woman dressed as a nurse walked into a newborn nursery, spoke to a young mother, and carried her 8-hour-old baby out of the building. Security did not notice, and that infant, Kamaya Mobley, disappeared for 18 years. The abductor, Gloria Williams, had suffered a miscarriage and convinced friends and family that the stolen baby was her own daughter, naming her Alexis Manigo. By all accounts, Williams raised her with love and stability in South Carolina. The truth surfaced only in 2017 after anonymous tips and new DNA technology confirmed her identity. The reunion between Kamaya and her birth family was bittersweet, joy entangled with confusion because she still loved the woman who had raised her. Williams was sentenced to 18 years in prison, 1 year for each year of abduction. Kamaya's story is a rare case of a lost child who grew up healthy and secure, proof that crime can leave emotional labyrinths no court can easily untangle. It also transformed hospital security around the world. Bracelet trackers, locked maternity wings, and silent alarms that all bear one infant's name in spirit.
Abduction of the Chibok Girls. On the night of April 14, 2014, in the small town of Chibok in northeastern Nigeria, armed militants from Boko Haram stormed a girls' boarding school. They herded 276 students, most aged 15 to 18, into trucks and disappeared into the Sambisa forest. Over the next several days, fires burned through classrooms and dormitories, an assault not just on families, but on the idea of female education itself. The world woke up outraged. The hashtag #BringBackOurGirls spread across continents as governments pledged support, but rescue efforts faltered in the vast terrain. Some girls escaped by jumping from moving trucks. Others were married off, trafficked, or forced into suicide missions. About 160 have eventually returned through escapes, military operations, or negotiation, but more than 100 remain missing even today. This one event exposed the intersection of terror, patriarchy, and global inequity. Boko Haram, whose name roughly means Western education is forbidden, used fear to silence classrooms. Yet Chibok's parents still hold nightly vigils, refusing to let hope die. The world's attention has waned, but their courage endures, as living proof that remembering is resistance.
Carlina White. In 1987, a 19-day-old infant named Carlina White developed a fever and was taken to the Harlem Hospital Center in New York. A woman disguised as a nurse comforted her parents, then calmly walked out of the hospital with the baby in her arms. For 23 years, no one knew where she was. Raised in Bridgeport, Connecticut under the name Nejdra Nance, Carlina always felt something was off. No birth certificate, no resemblance, a mother whose stories didn't fit. In 2010, she used online missing child databases and found an age progression photo that looked exactly like her. DNA tests confirmed her identity. The kidnapper, Ann Petway, pleaded guilty and served 12 years in prison. Rather than retreat, Carlina used her story to highlight decades of underreported neonatal abductions and advocates for stronger patient verification and awareness. Her case proved that truth can surface even after a lifetime of lies, and sometimes the missing end up solving their own mystery.
Jakob von Metzler, Frankfurt, Germany, September 2002. 11-year-old Jakob von Metzler, son of a prominent banking family, was kidnapped on his way home from school. A ransom note demanded 1 million euros and promised Jakob's safe return. His parents paid quickly. Hours later, police arrested 27-year-old law student Magnus Gofkin trying to collect the money.
Gofkin claimed Jakob was still alive, but he had already killed the boy within hours of the abduction. In custody, a German detective told Gofkin he would face pain if he did not reveal where the child was hidden. Fearful, Gofkin confessed, and Jakob's body was found by a lake. The officer's threat sparked a national firestorm. Could torture, or the threat of it, ever be justified to save a child's life? The courts ruled the threat illegal, but Gofkin's confession stood. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Jakob's death, and the moral debate that followed, became a European case study on ethics in law enforcement. It demonstrated that sometimes the darkness of a crime forces a society to examine how far it will go to stay humane, even in the face of pure evil.
Ingrid Betancourt set out by car toward the rebel-held town of San Vicente del Caguan to speak about peace. Hours later, her convoy was stopped by guerrillas from the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, better known as FARC. She and her campaign team were dragged at gunpoint into the jungle. For 6 years, she was held captive, often chained by the neck to a tree, marched through dense rainforest, and forced to record proof-of-life videos. Along with hundreds of other hostages, she endured malnutrition and disease while her family waged an international campaign for her release. The image of her pale face and defiant stare became a global emblem of hope. In July 2008, Colombian commandos disguised as humanitarian workers pulled off an extraordinary rescue, Operation Jaque, airlifting Betancourt and 14 others to freedom without a single shot fired. The raid was hailed worldwide as one of the century's most remarkable hostage rescues. Afterward, she wrote about faith, forgiveness, and the psychological scars of captivity. Her ordeal reminded the world that political conflict always takes its steepest toll on ordinary people, and that sometimes resilience itself becomes a form of victory.